Let me welcome everyone to our webinar on legal and financial innovation in land conservation, the next chapter. Today's event is hosted by the Harvard Ash Center's Government Innovators Network and the Conservation Innovation at the Harvard Forest. Jim Levitt, Director of the Program on Conservation Innovation at the Harvard Forest and Fellow in the Department of Planning and Urban Reform at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. Jim will be starting us off today.
Good all. I am delighted to say that there are more than 60 of you online right now. I think we're going to peak out about 70, which is a very good group for this kind of guest. We have people from the U.S. I think there are some 35 states represented, the people who are registered today, and several foreign nations. I know that there's at least one representative from Mexico online right now. We have a very interesting set of speakers today. Leigh Whelpton, who is Program Manager of Conservation Finance at Island Press, and Leslie Ratley-Beach, who is the Conservation Defense Director at the Land Trust Alliance. Both Leigh and Leslie have extensive experience in the field of conservation. We're going to hear from Leigh first. I will introduce her, and then after her presentation, we will hear from Leslie. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the program and then introduce Leigh. Leslie, again, I will introduce a little bit later. Who have followed web series or this internet broad series that we've been holding out of the Harvard School now for a number of years, you're familiar with the coverage that we've given to innovation in conservation finance and the related field of legal defense, or the defense of conservation easements. Years ago, there was a site that I helped to launch on conservation finance innovation, and through the part that we enjoy with Island Press and with University and a number of other institutions, Island Press has now taken that site over, and we are going to show you actually today the revised version of this very complete compendium of information on finance tools in the United States and internationally. I'm going to be able to introduce this chapter of conservation finance innovation, as well as an extremely important tool that Leslie Ratley-Beach is going to talk about, which is this proprietary insurance fund, at least that's what I call it, which is helping land trusts across the United States be assured that they will have the resources available to defend their conservation easements if it to those easements ever comes. It's a win tool that assures the financial and the managerial integrity of conservation easements in the United States, which is one of the most important tools for land conservation to have emerged in the last decades. So with that introduction, let's introduce Leigh, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for years. Leigh is from University of California, Berkeley, where she holds a BS in Conservation and Resource Studies. She then studied at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, where she got her master's degree. She has extensive experience in conservation, both abroad in the United States. She implemented training courses for the Conservation Fund in Namibia, in the permanent mission of Afghanistan at the United Nations. So she has kind of incredible and wide-ranging international experience. In addition to that, after graduating from Yale, she was hired by Island Press to help spearhead this new conservation finance network program that's sponsoring. So delighted to have you here today, and let me begin by asking what was it in your past, and it must have happened even prior to your getting to UC Berkeley, that inspired you to jump into the field of land and biodiversity conservation?
Well, you know, we've been talking about this this morning. I'll get to this. We've got a training course going on here again at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. But I'm one of those more cliche stories where you knew as a kid that these things mattered and that really important problems that needed solving. I say through my career, I've kind of gravitated towards solutions for those problems. You know, the angle that I find a lot of them in getting things done. So,
indeed, it is. So, let me ask you to right in with your presentation and tell us the Conservation Finance Network, boot camps, and beyond.
So, let's see. So thanks, Jim, for the introduction and for making me sound so qualified. But hello, as Jim said, my name is Leigh Whelpton. I am the program manager at the new Conservation Finance Network at Press. Just start by thanking the Harvard Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation for hosting this event. Also Jim for not only organizing, but for all of the support he's provided both to the boot camp training courses and to our fledgling program thus far. The purpose of this presentation is to share and in some regards publicly launch a new resource center on conservation finance. I'm going to start by sharing the history of the conservation finance boot camp training courses and to describe a unique feature that really helps get conservation outcomes on the ground. To then take a step back and kind of talk broadly about the program initiative, to take through our operating plan, and to leave you with our next steps. What I mean when I say Conservation Finance Boot Camp, it is an intensive week-long survey course. It's a exchange of experiences. By design, it's a small and intimate group of professionals, partner institutions, and others. And we find that composition really encourages dialogue and networking amongst attendees. Presenters talking about really forward-thinking programs and innovative uses of funding and financing techniques. This never stops evolving for whatever topics du jour are kind of coming around. So we address cutting-edge sources of public, private, and philanthropic funding and financing, innovative tools, strategies, programs, and partnerships. The partnerships part is very important, as many of you know. And you know, one of the best features is that this training course is really based in case studies and the experience of both attendees and presenters. There's a wealth of knowledge in the room, and it's exciting to just have conversations over the coffee breaks that occur. So more about the Conservation Project Workshop in just a second. Just to tell you a little bit about who's been through our training courses, this is current 9th camp. And by looking at the map, and I've excluded some of our international participants, we have had a few, but you see the diverse representation from our nearly 200 attendees. My way will fill in some of the gaps on where our attendees and alumni have come from. And this trail really benefits from the diversity of the people in the room. We've had, you know, a lot of land trust staff and board members represented, but we also have foundation leaders, private investors, and other folks that enrich the conversation. Workshop. This is a really unique feature of the training model. We work up attendee problems. Attendees bring these from their organizations. They pitch it to the group, something that their organization is facing. Participants vote to select, you know, a handful of projects that are workshopped throughout the course of the week. And just to kind of bring it home, one sample from last year's workshop comes from Frank Holloman at Naturaland Trust in South Carolina. At the and his team put together a plan for an acquisition project with some stewardship involved. So it started with a Forest Service Community Forest Grant, a state conservation bank grant. They luckily, were able to plan around some help from an angel donor. And the $500,000 in shortfall, they plan to make that up through timbering and looking into carbon credits. Last fall, Naturaland was awarded one of a handful of those community forest grants. All restrict their ability to put in conservation easements or to think about carbon credits. Despite the bumps in the road, it's a great example of how a plan from the workshop, the boot camp, can become a reality. And it's also a great example of what I hope to continue through this, which is helping people like Frank deliver on-the-ground conservation outcomes. So we're now able to be comprehensive in tracking the outcomes of our model, training model. So we did a survey of alumni. I'll talk about this a bit more. But over 30% of response to the survey, and this was of alumni, were to cite specific projects and programs that benefit or resulted from the boot camp course, which is just incredible. One of my favorite kind of takeaways from this so far, about a third of the people that cited concrete outcomes were mentors, which gives a good data point into the way in which thought leaders and experts can also be pushed to continue innovating in their own work. Not to gloss over some of this, but just to kind of give you a battering of the outcomes we've heard back from so far, respondent utilized a program-related investment, PRI, to bridge a $1.6 million acquisition. Another was awarded 2 grants of $4.1 million for the acquisition of 200 acres. They had started an LLC specifically for conservation finance and land acquisition. We have examples of new program initiatives, new investment models, and a lot of other exciting outcomes. More on that to come. Camp training courses, to take history, were created because of an identified need to increase the educational opportunities available to professionals on finance techniques for land resource conservation. Simply, there was not much existing at the time, so these kind of evolved to address need as much of our work is intent to do. And with the first few boot camps came this realization that there would be a great number of additional benefits from turning camps into a coordinated national program, the usual organizational home and professional staff. So this could bring together ad hoc approaches to training and could also leverage the growing body of knowledge and expertise in the field. Create a national conservation finance network, not only could we then operate additional training courses, but is enabling the development of a supportive community of practice. You've heard it, the Conservation Finance Network mentioned. It's our new program at Island Press. 9 months into the program's development, I do say that we're our public launch efforts now that we've been able to get a little further with our development so far is to deliver conservation finance tools and training to people to protect and steward natural resources. So, to help people increase natural resource conservation and stewardship through the use of innovative funding and financing. We do this by building a community of practice, and I will say a robust community of practice, that brings together thought leaders, practitioners, and partner institutions new training opportunities. So I'm in a very blessed position in that I have an incredible steering committee. We're calling them our working group for now. And so Peter Stein, Renee Kivico, Story Clark, and Brad Gentry, along with Denise Schenner at Island Press, I owe a great deal of gratitude. Story and Brad initiated the boot camp training program. They're currently upstairs putting on this new camp. And, the vision and direction for creating this new national network. at the Land Trust Alliance and Denise Schlenner at Island Press have also been instrumental in building the program within Island Press and guidance and advice to the program and its activities. Questions I always get, why are you at Island Press, a nonprofit environmental book publishing company? And Press's credit, this really shouldn't come as such a surprise. I have a three-dimensional approach to publishing. They work to deliver their messaging in print, in person, online. And in that, Island Press plays a very active role as a publisher, working to see the ideas that it disseminates implemented in policy and practice. And more for my program, Island Press is responsible for publishing the foundational literature on conservation finance. It's been a big part of the boot camps as well. All in all, Island Press is a great home for the new program. It provides both intellectual and institutional support for our various activities and partnerships, and it's just a really good team to be a part of. So the operating plan, I had mentioned that the Yale Conservation Finance Camp is underway upstairs. I currently have 21 attendees and a very high number of presenters this year, over 30 right now. And the specific course lectures that are being put on trust and investor perspectives, layering different types of finance. We have sessions on funding for restoration. This is a new one this year. Co-restoration funds, FEMA, state water revolving funds, and more. So I'm really excited to have this opportunity. At the Land Trust Rally in September, we're putting on a featured session. And it's going to be a conservation finance roundtable entitled "Where's the Money?" So look forward to that. In Department of Defense, we are putting on a federal partners camp in October, and this will be bringing together federal agencies, Hill staffers, and other partners to really think about partnering more effectively between agencies and with outside organizations. We've got slated a Western Rangelands Conservation Finance Camp. This is in partnership with the Texas Agricultural Land Trust and Texas A&M. We're working to really get some conservation finance training towards working lands and rangelands in both Texas, generally across the West. The bar camp, this is kind of experimental class, so it's a blending learning module of in-person and then mentorship. So we're really excited to bring together, this training, which is really to help land trusts and some other folks start to utilize debt finance strategies through a more holistic approach. And also considering, what is the most strategic way to move forward with our training programs, be it at Yale, be it at Stanford, the way that the courses have courses now. 7 of them have been here at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. 2 of them have been held at the Stanford Woods Institute. So we're trying to figure out, how to really bring the partnerships we've had so far forward as we evolve our strategy. As part of this, we're taking a strategic planning process to guide our efforts moving forward, and really considering, from websites to webinars, network events, and any other trouble we can get ourselves into, how we can proceed with the program development. And support. It's the official beta launch of our new website, as Jim had mentioned earlier. It really does bring together the resources he had organized as part of the Conservation Finance Forum, and to make this the go-to place for resources, information, and training tools on conservation finance strategies. We're in the phase of our website development process public to get functionality and to collect resources. And this basically means I need your help. I need ideas on the functionality and user interface, and also the help of the conservation community in sourcing articles, case studies, webinars, and other resources for our reference library. Just going to address quickly, we are, as I said, undergoing strategic planning process, or I'm encompassing it a strategic direction for guidance and adaptive plan for maneuverability. So surveys, doing some interviews, and really trying to find our value proposition and what we can add to the work that's already being done by so many great partners. Just from that we've conducted so far, really, really good data coming back that's helping us kind of ground check our assumptions. The majority of both attendees and presenters seek advice from each other on deals. I've already talked about some of the outcomes, and so not boot camps, but advice from peers and mentors came through as the most important that informs people's ability to utilize conservation finance strategies. And that's to inform the way that we're thinking about our programs going forward. This slide is just meant to show you we had overwhelming support for investing in new training models on geographically, topically, and regionally specific training courses, which you'll see reflected somewhat in our operating plan, with the debt finance camp, the Western Rangelands camp, etc. I also just want to share some other people advising our program. I'm humbled by those individuals serving in our advisory committee. You'll see Jim is among them, with our strategic planning process to really determine what the vision of success is for this network program moving forward. Just above 15 minutes with my time. I'll hurry through here, but really, our next steps, new training and learning opportunities. We're already doing that in many regards to create additional conservation finance courses, trainer capacity through workshops, and in some ways helping those individuals continue innovating through their own work. At our website today, we're building an interactive and dynamic online community and support network with distance learning tools like webinars and case studies. And creating and supporting an alumni network to further develop and disseminate ideas. That's just a quick snapshot of where we are with the development of our program. There's more coming, and I hope to enlist your support with building a robust network of committed experts, professionals, and partner institutions. So please shoot me an email if you'd like to join our listserv. We're also on Twitter, and as has been mentioned, our website's now live, so we have a number of resources already available to just continue ramping up and building in the months and years to come. So, thanks so much.
Leigh, that is really tremendously exciting to see how far this community of interest around conservation finance has come in 7 or 8 years. It's just tremendous, and the partners that you have on your site are just so impressive. I have a question that I've been sent from the field from the attendees. We now have 96 people online listening to this. From him, he asks, is there a date and location for this session on federal partners?
I'd have to look. It's a week there at recess. It's October the 18th, and it's going to be in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So if anyone wants to help with some of what's going to be involved, that would be just wonderful. And get in touch if you have some ideas.
So much. We will now go to the second part of the program, but I want to remind the listeners that there's a Q&A box on your screen. If you submit those questions, then I will pick among them and read them off to two members of our panel at the end of the second presentation. I'm sure that there are quite a few questions that will come up from this. Our guest is Ratley-Beach. Leigh has a long and distinguished career in education as well. She has a bachelor's degree from the University of Oregon. That makes her which wife is also a duck, so I'm very happy to see that. She has her law degree from Boston University, and following her time at university, she worked for more than a dozen years at the Vermont Land. Leslie used to be based in Vermont, now has worked for the last 6 years for the Alliance, which, as I think almost all of you know, is the national association in the United States of all the organizations. Has used her legal skills to run a number of projects, to prepare publications, speak nationally, particularly about the Conservation Defense Network, which is people from land trusts getting together and thinking about how they can defend the easements that they hold from encroachment or other legal problems that they have. Most notably, she has helped with the help of other people on the Land Trust Alliance and leadership of LTA to create something that has never existed before. It's called the Terrafirma Retention Group, LLC, and it is an organization that helps land trusts a surprising number with a surprising number of easements across the nation to defend these easements which they have worked so hard to create. So let me open with the same question to you that I asked to Leigh. How do you decide to get involved in all of this very important work? And we will use that as a springboard to go into your presentation.
So much, Jim, for that very, very kind introduction. I have to give a somewhat similar answer to you that Leigh, growing up in the very, very far north of California in the Cascade Range, I went in with the mountains, and it just became a part of me, I think, from the moment of my birth, and I had to do something, and it's the legal aspect that drew me in as a way to be effective. So that's my story about how I got here today.
That's your story, and you're sticking to it, and that's
I am.
Right. And let me ask you to just launch into your presentation that you've worked so hard to prepare on terra firma.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with you all and really honored to be included in the Conservation Innovation webinar series. I saw many friends on the registration list, so that makes me happy. As many of you may know, Terrafirma just started insuring conservation defense liability for land trusts on March 1st, 2013. So we have 2 brand new programs in the world of finance for conservation. It's very exciting. And I want to say a special thank you to the Lincoln Institute, who has done so much and was one of the original founders of the Land Trust Alliance decades ago. They were building the conservation vision for years, so thank you very much. It's a unique tax-exempt program. It's a safety net for land. It's not a substitute for sufficient reserves. All the participating land trusts have reserves and are working on building them. Terrafirma is a part of their risk finance portfolio. Terrafirma helps with the liability for upholding conservation permanence that every single land trust has. In fact, every single conservation organization has, even if it's a government agency or some other. Provides the funds for legal-related costs for easements and fee land, so the land trusts may choose to insure their entire portfolio or just easements or just fee land. Now, Terrafirma does insure mostly conservation easements, although there are quite a bit of fee land included already. And it does. The posture of the land trust is in a challenge to conservation, whether defending from a challenge or a lawsuit, or they are seeking to enforce their property rights in a conservation easement or a fee land reserve. that they hold. Terrafirma covers both. It was really critical to be able to cover both so that we can uphold conservation permanence. Very strong risk management and loss prevention program. Again, we want to avoid unnecessary litigation and be able to concentrate our resources to uphold conservation permanence in the face of legal challenges over a long term. Goals of Terrafirma are upholding the conservation obligations forever, whether it's fee land or a conservation easement. So we're to defend conserved land in the best possible given all the facts and circumstances. We'll challenges in a case-by-case basis, aim at some overall principles of conservation, preventing problems to the fullest extent possible, creating good law, and maintaining confidence in conservation. That's absolutely critical, and we're seeing a challenge nationally of third parties, but some successor owners who feel they have deeper pockets than perhaps a small volunteer land trust, and that they are just going to run that land trust into the ground and bankrupt them and thereby eliminate the restrictions from a fee-owned preserve. Terrafirma balances this dynamic. Trust owner insureds collectively total 423 land trusts in 46 states and the District of Columbia. There are 1,700 land trusts in America right now, private land trusts. About of those are insured with Terrafirma, but 1,700 not all have a conservation portfolio, so we roughly have half of the land of the conservation portfolio, but Terrafirma insures 79% of the privately held conservation easements in America, excluding those few, really it's very large land trusts who are capable of self-insurance, like Ducks Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy, so forth. Alliance Management Services, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Land Trust Alliance, manages the day-to-day operations of Terrafirma. I'm staff vice president of Alliance Risk Management Services. Terrafirma is supported by 4 outside contractors. We'll talk more about that later. I think an interesting concept here is that this insurance is not commercially available. And we approached many large carriers to provide this coverage with a detailed outline of a program. They all declined to create the program because they did not understand our risk and felt it was not going to be lucrative enough. Alliance was left with no choice but to partner with just hundreds and hundreds of people and land trusts across the country to create the first ever captive program for land trusts to ensure their conservation liability risk. This is domiciled in Vermont. Vermont is the lead regulator, the index regulator. We are registered in all the other states, but under the federal statute, Vermont is the regulator with of Terrafirma. It's organized as a limited liability company. Interesting fact, it's one of the very few combination risk retention group limited liability companies doing work. It's presented some challenges explaining it to regulators, but we have gotten over that hurdle. Another interesting addition is it is the fourth charitable risk pool in America under the tax code 501, and the other 3 are a collective out of California also doing nonprofit insurance. I'll talk more about this later. The land trusts themselves, insured by Terrafirma, actually own Terrafirma. In the land trust community, about 30 years, we've been talking about this for about 30 years. From 2004 meeting when the Heart of the Rockies group in the West decided to make something happen. It's taken us that long, 9 years, to actually get it on its feet. The Land Trust Alliance picked this up. It was the Conservation Defense Initiative, which I lead, and led the team carrying it through to inception over these last 6 years. I think this is pretty impressive for a startup. Another 50 or so to join in 2014. They're still working on some last eligibility requirements. I emphasize that Terrafirma is available only to 501c3s. We did that in order to raise the $4 million from the 8 foundations and some major donors for the capital. They needed to be able to donate to a tax-exempt. The tax-exempt structure requires that the owners be only 501c3, means no government agencies, and this is U.S. only, so it's not available outside of the United States. Also, low-cost coverage for what you're getting, both the support, the management, loss prevention, and tools, as well as the actual legal cost support. The $60 per year per property is very, very low cost. It's land trust friendly, avoids the moral hazards the insurance executives worry about with the $5,000 deductible. So there's participation that is involved in the case management. They can't just hand it off and say go deal with it like you might do in an auto claim. That's not what we're doing. We're all in this together. And as the owners of Terrafirma, they bear the risk of the success and sustainability and solvency of Terrafirma. No co-payments, except in one unusual circumstance. We felt that was very important so that it's the risk trust is known. It's the $5,000 deductible with the $500,000 cap. So what you're looking at here. Structure and management. Now I'm going to move a little faster through these. Insurance policy has one annual enrollment that helps keeps our costs down and keeps everybody moving forward together. It never pre-existing claims, so any problem that existed before March 1st, 2013 is not covered. We have that in order to be able actuary to know what risk was and to have come to the right capital amount and the right amount for the premium. As data, we'll be looking at all of the numbers, and we may be refining as we go along. 13 eligibility criteria, they're pretty basic to land trust. We have 32 exceptions from coverage. Common is an example, tax audits by the IRS, another example, cracks, claims, etc. Not surprising exclusions when you look at the policy. And of course, trust must timely report problems in order to get coverage. Structure I mentioned before, so you see at the top, the land trusts are the owner members. So they own Terrafirma there in the gray. The support for Terrafirma comes from contractors. So Alliance Risk Management Services, I said, contracts with Terrafirma to provide the conservation and day-to-day management. Then there's a captive manager that handles the insurance, regulatory, finance, reporting, filing, reports with all of the states, and in touch with the Vermont regulators through their audits of the solvency of Terrafirma, plus an action and an auditor. So there's a lot of support for this conservation and defense liability company. Since land trusts are busy doing conservation, we need those experts and regulated insurance company. Of Terrafirma provides general oversight, direction. Those are drawn from the insured land trust senior leadership and regionally. We are really, really fortunate to have some very empowered attorneys from diverse sectors and one insurance industry expert who spent 42 years with all kinds of insurance companies sitting on the claims committee, managing how the claims are handled with the land trust participation and local counsel. So service to land trust is our guiding principle in claim management. We're trying to balance an array of factors to get the best possible result at a reasonable cost in a timely manner. One for Terrafirma is knowing and following all the applicable rules in each state regarding claim just one example. As we encounter claims, we have not had a claim yet, but as we encounter claims in local council, then we understand what rules we have to address each particular state before we even start upholding conservation permanence. This can be expensive. Our data suggests that we should expect 8 to 12 claims a year. That's what we did the actuarial support. We'll see. Discuss the aspect of Terrafirma now or later, call, email. If you ask questions now, I've given you a very, very high-level overview to answer any detailed questions that Jim says we have time for. Thank you all so very much.
Thanks. That was the fact that the land trust is now dealing really in quite sophisticated financial insurance products to this tool. Is something I'm not sure everyone would have expected 10 or 20 years ago. This is a set of developments for the new chapter. We remind all of the people listening that if you will put your Q&A, your questions for these two, in the box on, I believe, what is the right side of your screen, then I will select from those questions and read them to our guests, to Leigh and Leslie. So please add your questions right now so that I can do that. I have one question from Lori Olson. We have the dates, Leigh, for the Western Rangelands Conservation Finance Camp in Texas.
We don't have specific dates yet, but Lori, you are on my list of next steps to loop in on the Texas training. So glad to hear you here on this session and expect some follow-up from me next week.
A lead-off question for the two of you. First for Leslie and then for Leigh. Leslie, how does Terrafirma and the work that you're doing interdigitate with long-term efforts in practices, in education, and the action? Some would say professionalization, some would not, but the increased sophistication of the land trust movement. And Leigh, for you, how does this increased financial service network that you're providing correlate with the increasing sophistication of the movement? So let me answer that first.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Great question. I'm going to give you a two-part answer. First, with regard to standard practices and accreditation, one of the great things about Terrafirma is it's a really nice intermediate step, especially for smaller or newer land trusts who are still working on full implementation of standards and practices, which would be accreditation standard. Terrafirma, as I said, has 13 eligibility criteria in order to purchase insurance from Terrafirma. Those are all based on standards and practices. We selected what we felt were the most fundamental, such as we have a baseline report completed for every single conservation easement. And that one's an all or nothing. If you can't honestly say 100% baselines, then you may not insure anything with Terrafirma. Just an example. An example. 100% annual visits. You know, there's a little, we got an 8-foot blizzard and didn't get out there. That's fine. Come to reserves every year. So with 13 of those, you can say yes honestly to all of them. You can purchase insurance, and that goes a long way down the road toward full implementation of standards and practices. And ultimately, if the land trust feels it's appropriate, you can consider applying for accreditation. Two of my answer is, with the use of the word sophistication, one of the terrific things I think about the conservation movement in America is the volunteer depths of feet in the ground that we have, and you still have that and be all volunteer and be sophisticated without having paid staff, which I think is what the professionalization thing, I think it's a little misconstrued, but definitely is advancing sophistication of land. And we hope ultimately all land trusts have adequate reserves that with the additional leverage of facing some of that risk through Terrafirma, it will free up a portion of funds individually in land trusts to be able to invest in aspects of advancing conservation.
Leigh, do you want to take a swing?
Sure. So kind of, following on some of Leslie's comments on the professional development and sophistication within the field, professionalization, interesting to me is the ways in which both of our programs are really arising to address need, and I think that it's kind of indicative of ways in which there has been this kind of new, sophisticated organizational development occurring. And we are trying to address that with the way that we're building our service portfolio from kind of two ends. Folks that need encouragement and need confidence to begin implementing, starting to realize, again, reacting to need, that they're thinking about funding and financing opportunities for their work in maybe less conventional ways or to take advantage of new opportunities. But so a lot of advanced practitioners who are able to use things like state revolving funds, Newmar tax credits, have the kind of business acumen to partner with impact investors. So the for our program development is really to kind of take the ball and run with it for folks that really are sophisticated and are able to take advantage of advanced tools while still catering to people who need it of encouragement and confidence in order to, use new funding and finance strategies.
Very good. A comment actually from Barbara Pike, who is in Canada. Her congratulations from Canada on these initiatives. She's watching and following carefully. She has been for many years. Then I want to add that as associated with that is to what extent are the tools and techniques that you're offering now or potentially in the future that can be used in the United States in places where there are emerging land movements, in places like Australia, in on the Europe. There are many nations where the trust movement is becoming an intriguing or at least a possibility. And let me Leigh on that one, and then Leslie, I'll let you make a comment.
Well, this is kind of a fun one for you to answer because, I started out being kind of at the forefront of some innovation at the international scale and have tried to bring that forward with my work domestically. So, in Namibia, you have some really interesting landscape scale approaches to conservation and development for that matter. So a lot of work at the Cheetah Conservation Fund was working with farmers, working with ranchers on communal conservancies, on privately owned, so that's like where you have communal land tenure and then land tenure, to basically bring forward collaborative landscape scale approaches with specific legal mechanisms. So we know that these things are happening. And just a little bit more to your question, the one how these tools and techniques can be used outside of the U.S., I think they're being used. I think there's a pretty big opportunity to learn from the way that tools and techniques are adapted to fit different legal and financial contexts. Now, needs to focus domestically kind of at the beginning here to really get our feet underneath us. We have a lot of folks kind of take snippets from either the camps or from similar related programming and making it their own in the context that's relevant for their work. So I think it's a really exciting time to be learning side and within kind of the U.S. conservation community and abroad.
And Leslie, I know that Terrafirma LLC is limited to trust in the United States, but what is the technique you use potentially to other nations?
You zoom out to the idea of collective participation in upholding conservation, so that you get from the old model of everybody's on their own, everybody needs $1 million or $2 million in the bank and lawyers to defend their own, and say, we're stronger together, whatever country you're in, Australia, Canada, Chile, wherever, and everybody pools their risk and their resources. That's the whole idea behind Terrafirma. So everybody's going to have different laws, figure out what your laws are, and then how you can leverage business ideas, business models for active conservation and defense.
Great. All right, another question from Nick Williams. There are a lot of land trusts need to complete their DRs in order to become eligible for Terrafirma. And I'll take another direction after you answer that particular technical question.
Okay, so BDRs are baseline documentation reports, and yes, if I had to pick one of the eligibility criteria that is most challenging for the most land trusts, it's the 100%. You must have 100% baseline documentation. So many of the smaller land trusts are still working on that particular one.
All right. So my follow-up question to that is, what are the strategies that you either have in place or are thinking about for to expand the communities of practice that you're working with? Specifically, there are a number of fairly large and well-endowed land trusts across states that are likely to participate in both of these new ventures, both of the networks, if you will. There are others, some of which have professional staff, some of which are all volunteer. We're looking at this with great interest. Perhaps could use outreach. What are your strategies for reaching out to that next concentric circle of people and conservation movement? Reach them with your services. Let's you.
Okay, great. Trust Alliance, now putting on my Land Trust Alliance hat, has a number of programs already in place. You mentioned the Conservation Defense Network. That is one of them. That's an expert-only, invitation-only network. Always think ahead and then disseminate ideas and resources out to the larger community. We also have a Conservation Defense Fund controlled by the Land Trust Alliance, and we're working with the 15 largest, most sophisticated land trusts to become participants in that by both contributing a significant amount of cash and then sitting on an advisory board on how we deploy that fund for precedent-setting cases. So that's in addition to Terrafirma's owned trust. The fund is controlled by the Land Trust Alliance, and we hope to involve the operation of these other largest land trusts that do not need to purchase the Terrafirma insurance. And then we have a variety of support programs within the Land Trust Alliance and are actively reaching out to land trusts, still working on cleaning backlogs of baselines. Many of the older land trusts that have portfolios of good or more still have backlogs. So we're working with them to address that and working with land trusts who might be struggling with other of the eligibility criteria to meet the criteria to be able to participate. So it all works together to advance along the road of full implementation of land trust standards and practices. And I, with my Terrafirma hat, risk management hat on, I've been talking to attorneys and insurance folks around the country. I did an ABA webinar just a few weeks ago. We have now for land trusts, and so we're getting the word out about its existence and helping people to understand it and participate in it if they're eligible.
You detailed some of this in your presentation already, but what we're going to be doing in the next 6 months to a year to make people in the land trust community in this country and internationally aware of all the activities that are going on?
Oh, you know, it's what we're doing and how are we going to make that known. So immediately, and I talk about this a bit, we're through our activities. We're working through things like the Land Trust Alliance Rally and having our featured session there, which is a 3-hour workshop for solving participant problems. You know, the biggest thing for us is building a really robust in-person online network. So some events, some kind of community building through online engagement, because finding that advice and peer support goes a long way towards getting people the confidence to be able to implement some of these tools and techniques that may seem, you know, that beyond the reach of all volunteer land trusts that may not have in-house business acumen or financial expertise. So,
yeah, very good. Well, it is getting very close to the noon hour when we're going to adjourn. So I want to close this just by mentioning a couple of people's names who have been working in the background to make both of these new services available, and they've been working for years at it. We also mentioned Peter Stein, Story Clark, and Brad Gentry as some of the founders of the Conservation Finance Network, and I can tell you from personal experience that they have worked many, many long days and nights to make it all come to pass. And on the Conservation Defense Network and on Terrafirma, I want to mention the incredibly hard work that Rand Wentworth, who is the president of the LTA, as well as Fred Rich, who is a partner of Sullivan and Cromwell, a member of the board of directors of the LTA, and a long-standing supporter of Scenic Hudson. Creativity, time, and effort Fred has put in to the creation of Terrafirma. There are relatively unsung heroes in all of this, along with Leigh and everybody else working with them. Congratulate them on bringing us to this point. So with that, it is 12 o'clock. It is an absolutely perfect late spring day in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm going to go outside and enjoy it. I thank you all for joining us today and invite you to join us this year when we will have another podcast for the Conservation Innovation Network. So with that, good day. Have a great summer.